feliz que estaba otra vez en México. Primera vez estuve aquí en 61, hace muchos años. Después volví en 2011 y antes de eso estaba con ese mismo grupo coyuntural en Argentina, en Buenos Aires, en 07. Pero no lo voy a torturar con mi español, que no es tan mal, pero no sirve ser más preciso. Entonces, comenzamos con la segunda lectura en inglés de hoy.
Se acerca más al micrófono, compañero.
Ok, ¿está bien? ¿Mejor? Why cooperatives? The Occupy movements began in Tunisia, they spread to Greece, Egypt, New York, Occupy Wall Street. These were tremendous movements of the population, and they give me hope that these kind of Occupy movements are the basis of supporting cooperatives when cooperatives reach their place in society, which I hope will one day be the form of work instead of the oligarchy, hierarchical capitalist firms. The Occupy movements claim legitimacy to the commons and the public spaces. My question is, don't workers deserve the same space in their factories or enterprises? They've earned it exactly the same way by dint of their labor and sweat. They have the right, after decades of work. Almost every factory that goes into bankruptcy has had workers work for 10, 20, 30 years, and suddenly they take off, go to a third world country for cheaper resources, cheaper labor. It's time to put an end to that and have the workers occupy the factory. Cooperatives are a unique alternative to capitalist hierarchical firms for several reasons. I think Marcelo mentioned the first one, which is certainly true. And I saw that in Argentina. I've been working on Argentine empresas recuperadas since 2004. And I know they come in from various ideological perspectives. And they learn their class consciousness at work through their backgrounds can be conservative, liberal, radical, but they come together and they learn their ideology at work. And it's an ideology learned on the job and not externally from leftist groups or intellectuals. It's a learned experience. Secondly, they establish participatory work relationship with each other, which is pretty clear. Everybody on this panel would certainly agree with that. They have also the potential to create working class autonomy, and by doing this, they create little silos. Yes, they're silos of participation, but these silos, as one Argentine leader told me, with every little silo, there's a little revolution that we can build on. We have to multiply these little cooperative revolutions. Also, I found in Argentina that the cooperative workers are far more militant than the union workers. When there's a meeting, a protest, a march, they come out. The union workers usually stay home. There's some exceptions, some metal workers and printer workers, but by and large, the unions abstain. Fifthly, once established, the cooperatives are a leading edge against oligarchic capitalism, even though they work within the capitalist system, but they're subversive to the capitalist system. The U.S. has what is eminent domain? The U.S. has a legal mechanism provided by the U.S. Constitution and most of the states that have the same provisions. And that is to promote and establish worker-owned and worker-managed enterprises. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution states, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." And it is this first part of this clause that's so important, because it allows the government to come in and take over an enterprise if it's for public use. And over time, that public use has become public purpose and public interest. So it's become very expanded. There have been various Supreme Court cases that have favored eminent domain on behalf of communities who are trying to develop and trying to create jobs and protecting the deterioration of community life, increasing poverty and so on. And I won't go into them, but there's several that are listed here. Now, there are two principal obstacles to eminent domain as I see it. The first one is this underlying ideology of the sanctity of private property. And I think we really have to go back to Locke and blame him for this, but there have been other theorists like Blackstone who have recognized that private property has its responsibilities to the community. And this is totally rejected by American capitalist firms, as we all know, and Mexican capitalist firms, as you all know. So the second obstacle is, and this is very understandable, I was involved in a struggle for Stella D'Oro workers, cookie makers in the Bronx. The workers occupied the factory. They got certain benefits from through the National Labor Relations Board, but when push came to shove, they accepted severance pay and they left their jobs. And there were 100 workers. And this is one of the problems. And I understand it. An apple in the hand is better than an apple in the tree. And workers are very tempted to take severance pay. And they do take it, but it undermines the struggle for worker solidarity and cooperatives. Now, I have several stages on using eminent domain. First is that workers, on learning that their factory or enterprise is about to move, to close, or to claim bankruptcy, they must occupy the factories. This is primordial. This has to be the first stage. It's militant, it's problematic, there are police repercussions, but it is a struggle that will fulfill the imagination of the public, because the public understands workers who want to protect their jobs. Even conservatives in America understand workers trying to protect their jobs. Now, since the Occupy movement occupied Wall Street, I think there's more and more of a latent support for this kind of worker occupation. We have to see it come about, to see if I'm right about this, but I do think it's possible. Thirdly, the workers must create a cooperative. And cooperatives are very easy to create. You organize yourselves into a corporation. All you need is a law school student to help you, and you create the papers and you organize yourself. Fourthly, public sector intervention by use of eminent domain is critical. Eminent domain has really been tried only once in the US on behalf of workers. It was thought about in the Chicago New Era workers, but they got a grant from Workers' World, a subsidiary from the private endowment. And so they were able to get the funding to begin to make the windows and doors, winterized windows and doors. But in Massachusetts, in the little town of Staunton, they tried it too, but it didn't work because they owned the factory but not the land, so they had to go back to the legislature and get home rule. By that time, the workers accepted the severance package. And again, it cost 100 jobs. And fifthly, in most cases, and this is very important, I know many of you will disagree with the possibility of this, But I think what you need is for obviously the state municipality has to intervene with eminent domain, but they also have to intervene with a subsidy or seed support to get the cooperative off the ground, because usually the workers don't have the income to substantiate the beginnings of a cooperative. Why eminent domain? Factory and enterprise closings have severe negative economic repercussions and societal externalities on workers and communities. These economic fallouts legitimize the right to regulate them by way of eminent domain on behalf of the public interest. As I said, the Supreme Court uses the word public interest. The collective social rights of workers who have contributed to their community through hard work and applying their know-how have to be legally established and asserted. The companies cannot be free of societal obligations. By outsourcing their jobs, they've broken a social contract, as Rousseau would speak about, for which there must be reparations and consequences. So we need to use eminent domain. It's not very different. It's not really radical. It's no more power for the state than raising taxes, protecting consumers, protecting people from environmental degradation, taxing and spending. 7, eminent domain and worker cooperatives. In the US, eminent domain has been used for many decades for building highways, airports, hospitals, municipal offices, libraries, public parks, sports complexes, in the name of urban and community development and public benefit. I think it's especially appropriate to use the same rationale to protect the workers against the loss of industrial and service jobs. What greater public purpose would there be than preserving employment for the same public that represents 99% of the society? Eminent domain has been used for private corporations, for GM, for Columbia University. Why not use it for the working class that represents all of us? When workers occupy factories and enterprises, they're not really taking anything. That is my view. They are trying to keep something that they've created with their manual and intellectual capital over time. By allowing capital to be invested, by their consumption of goods and services, by paying their taxes, by their consumption and expenditures, and their everyday involvement in the civic life of their community. In other words, it's time that the working class gets the benefit of public service on their behalf. And I do think this is an agenda that it's probably not going to happen from the federal government in the United States, but it's probably going to happen from progressive municipal councils, such as in Seattle, or Berkeley, or Amherst, or Boston, and then that would become a model for behavior in other cities throughout the country. Finally, defense of the working class, worker ownership and management of the workplace is a clear alternative to the capitalist hierarchical firm, because it will benefit community development, social justice, and worker autonomy. Without eminent domain and cooperatives, we condemn those in the working classes in the surrounding communities to unemployment, a shrinking tax base, poverty, and the erosion of the skilled labor force. So I ask, how can we stand idly by when we have the legal mechanism that will place worker rights in the center of the political debate?
Gracias a Peter.